Hello, I'm back. Sorry, having some technical difficulties here, but I am back. My name is Dustin Zarni. I'm the Democratic Elections Commissioner, and welcome to Commissioner in a Car. Today is Tuesday, October 4th, and we are talking about the GOP lawsuit on absentee ballots today. This is something that broke late on Friday. A lawsuit was filed last week. I think it was on Tuesday it was actually filed, but people weren't served until Friday. And the lawsuit is brought by mainly, there's a whole bunch of people on the suit, but it's mainly Nick Langworthy acting in his capacity as GOP chair of the New York State, and two elections commissioners, Republican elections commissioners, Eric Height of Dutchess County and Ralph Moore of Erie County, and then the Saratoga Republican Party. And this was filed down in Saratoga in Ballston Spa, and this is the venue that will hear this lawsuit. Of course, no matter how this lawsuit goes, I imagine that there will be a lot of appeals on this. It'll go up to the Third Department Appellate Court and then into the Court of Appeals, which is remember, Supreme Court is not the Supreme Court. The Court of Appeals is the top court in New York State. So that is what happened. Now, the lawsuit contends to throw out two main things that have been going on this year with absentees. The first thing that they're trying to throw out is the pandemic excuse. As you know, for the last several years, people could use temporary illness as a reason to get an absentee, and included in the temporary illness, one of the excuses that was acceptable was risk of pandemic spread of disease. And then the other thing they're trying to throw out is the new process for counting absentees, where absentees are counted before Election Day instead of after Election Day, are not subject to outside challenges, and are reported with the results on Election night. They are trying to force New York State to go back to the old system that happened last year. Now, this is now, David, my friend David Harding is in the chat doing a lot of questions that aren't about the lawsuit. And I'm just going to say right now, I'm going to do most of this about the lawsuit because I think it's important. And it's a long, winding tale, most of this Commissioner in Car. If I have time at the end, I'll go back to some of these other questions. So why are they bringing this lawsuit so late in the year, and why not, why were the changes put in place that they're trying to affect? This actually goes all the way back to general election 2020. As the pandemic was raging, before vaccines were widely available, New Yorkers took advantage of the absentee ballot system in record numbers. In Onondaga County, we had 60,000 absentee ballots that came in. And because there were so many absentee ballots that came in, most of the races could not be called on election night. And because of the rhetoric of Donald Trump, the absentee ballots actually tended to favor Democrats. We had early voting favoring Democrats and election day favoring Republicans. And so on election night, there was this red mirage that came in. And as we waited to count the absentee ballots, which wouldn't be counted until sometimes up to 2 weeks after election day, because we had to wait the 7 days for all of the ballots to come in and make sure that anybody who voted on election day or during early voting did not have their absentee ballot counted. This gave GOP lawyers across the state an opportunity to descend on boards of elections to try to challenge ballots, and they were not challenging on the basis of merit. They were challenging on the basis of party. They would know who the Democrats were that put in absentee ballots and would level ridiculous and usually, bad faith objections on these ballots. And it would slow down the process. In Onondaga County, we had a COVID scare during the middle of it. Actually, not a scare, an infection, where most of our staff got COVID positive because of the 50 plus people that had descended on our building to watch us open these 60,000 ballots. And that shut us down for 2 weeks. Once we came back, we were able to limit the number of people inside the building. But and then it took us another week after that. So we weren't done with absentee balloting until well into December. I believe December 2nd, we were finally certified, or December 3rd. So at the beginning of December, usually we're done by Thanksgiving. And during this, lawyers, there was the famous Farland videotape of, him objecting to a ballot, but then finding out that the person voted for, indicated he was going to vote for Donald Trump. So he then removed his objection. There were, a Republican watcher that was trying to throw out all veterans ballots because it wasn't properly timestamped, which they were. There is just all kinds of ridiculous challenges that came in, well documented by Syracuse.com, who came in and videotaped the proceedings, much to the scorn of New York State. Now, this wasn't just happening here in Onondaga County. It was happening all throughout the state, anywhere there was close races. And then what would happen is you'd have these weeks and weeks of objections, and then once the races were pretty much out of hand, they would release all the objections. So what happened in Central New York, the big race that they were really focusing on was the 50th Senate District. John Mannion beat Angie Renna, actually by quite a bit, by 4 or 5%. But it became very clear but when we came back from COVID, that Angie Renna was not going to be able to catch up. They weren't objecting to enough ballots, keeping them out of the pool, and there was just no way for them to actually overcome the margin. And so they released all their objections. And that happened in the old system all the time. So the New York State legislature, seeing this ridiculous, process in place, and knowing that we would have more and more absentee ballots in the future as more and more people decide that they're either permanently disabled or out of town or taking advantage of the absentee ballot system, decided that they needed to change the way we counted absentee ballots. And also because we would hold our results so much, later than any results in the country, we were subject to ridicule throughout the country. So these absentee ballots were then, they made it a change in the law. And the change in the law said that now no longer could you go to the polls and vote. If you requested an absentee, you can no longer go to the polls and vote on the machine. You had to either vote by absentee or vote by affidavit at the polls. And then also that boards of elections were required to canvass these absentee ballots within 4 days of receipt. And within those 4 days of receipt, we would then be able to determine the validity of the ballot and whether whether the ballot was properly canvassed by the board. And then we would scan in those ballots before Election Day, once before early voting and once the day after early voting, but before Election Day. And then only a small amount of absentee ballots would be held until after Election Day now. Those are only the ballots received on the Monday before election and in the Tuesday of Election Day and the 7 days after. Those ballots would then be counted after Election Day. So this significantly reduced the number of absentees that would be counted after Election Day. And the results would be reported with election night results. Now, we've already done this. We've already done it twice. Both of the primaries that we had in New York, in June and in August of this year have had this absentee ballot process in place. And it's worked phenomenally well. In fact, we were able to get results out in record times. We were able to certify in record times. And I find it ironic that Nick Langworthy, who is the GOP chair, who was also a candidate for Congress in the August primary, and Commissioners Haidt and Moore, who were commissioners during the June and August primaries, did not levy their lawsuit or objections until now, until days after the first absentees ballots went out in the general election. So that is one of my big problems with the lawsuit, where they're trying to undo all this by saying it's not in the Constitution, that it doesn't protect anonymity, which is not true, that it doesn't allow them to object, that, again, their objections are not, we have bipartisan teams of commissioners that look over everything, so their objections are not needed. And there's no right for civilians to object. They can still observe, but they can't object. And, and again, we have Republicans and Democrats in the room that can make those objections and make rulings based on the merit of the law and not the the wishes of the partisans that are involved. And one of the big reasons why it's different in a general than a primary, in a general, you can kind of make guesses about how someone's going to vote based on their voter registration, where in a primary, you're talking about voters inside the same party. And so they couldn't make these, ridiculous objections because they didn't have anything to go on to try to decide, you're not really, and remember, they're not really objecting based on actual, rules. They're levying objections based on party registration, in my opinion. And so, and that, again, that's borne out by the fact that they leave those objections on the floor once they have no votes to be able to win. So that is why they've waited so long to file this lawsuit. But by waiting so long, we have boards of elections that have already not only sent out absentee ballots, but already started receiving them back and canvassing them. As of today's stats at the Onondaga County Board of Elections, we have sent over 9,200 absentee ballots. We've already received about over 300 back. Most of those have been canvassed as of today, and that means when you canvass them, you open them, you take the ballot out of them, you no longer tie it to the envelope because you want to protect the anonymity of the vote, and those ballots are stored without being looked at by election district in a secure box by our bipartisan teams of electors. So this has already been happening at boards all throughout New York State. I've talked to my friends down in New York City. They've actually opened up over 400 ballots as of this morning. So hundreds, maybe thousands of ballots have been opened statewide. And now they brought this lawsuit. And that is dangerous because they're trying to get the pandemic excuse withdrawn and hold the counting of absentee ballots until after Election Day. Let me dial in on the pandemic excuse. This has actually already been upheld in many different court cases. There was 2 different court cases in 20 and 21. And then just recently, a court case in Warren County last week upheld that New York could have a pandemic excuse, noting that the pandemic excuse law that is in place expires at the end of this year. So some of the ridiculous comments that the pandemic is over, so we don't need that pandemic excuse, just ignores the fact that people have been requesting absentees, filling out applications all year long, believing that they have this right to this pandemic excuse and making decisions about how they vote. And also ignoring the fact that because this has been set up under the temporary illness portion of the application, which does not make you state the exact reason why you're getting an absentee. People who may be in chemotherapy, people who have broken their legs, people who have nothing to do with the pandemic use the temporary excuse portion or temporary illness portion to get an absentee ballot. So not knowing why somebody actually used it makes it impossible to be able to take those excuses back, especially now that we've sent out absentee ballots and received them back. And, going back to the whole moving the absentees until after Election Day, that is not fair to the voters as well, because that's giving an extra scrutiny to people who have absentee ballots, more scrutiny to them than early voters or Election Day voters. And you need to be able to treat all voters fairly, in my opinion. We need to be able to have these results on election night. If we're reporting these results on election night, we won't have those red mirages and blue waves that have, allowed people to play on our fears and deny election results, saying that, boards of elections changed votes overnight, ignoring the fact that absentee ballots were coming in and we weren't allowed to canvass those ballots until well after Election Day. So this is very important. It's an important lawsuit. The lawsuit happens at 1:00 tomorrow. The first hearing. We have no idea when they will have a ruling on it. It's also important to note that there's no temporary restraining order. So that means that the people who are suing have not asked the judge to put a restraining order on boards of elections from canvassing absentee ballots. So while they're deciding this, we're still going to be canvassing absentee ballots. So until there's an injunction or a stay by the court, or both. So if this judge rules against anything or for anything, I imagine that either party is going to take this to the appellate court and then the Court of Appeals, and that will take another week to 10 days after a ruling is in to probably get this settled. Whether the appellate courts issue a stay on the lower court's order, all of that is to be determined. But as of right now, absentee balloting in New York stays as it has for the two primaries that we've already had. We are receiving absentees. We are ruling on absentees. We are counting those absentees. So that is what's happening. So now I'm going to go back to some of the questions. David wanted to know about my budget testimony. Well, I put my budget testimony online. I'm very happy that the county legislature did not give us everything that we wanted, but through the executive budget, we were given 2 extra positions for next year, and they also understand that if we have a full countywide primary, we may need to ask for more funds after that full countywide primary to pay inspectors. We will have a full fleet of inspectors next year. And there's also indications that they're going to approve our capital budget to get full new machines and ballot on-demand printers. So that is on its way. It's not everything I wanted, but it's something. Each of the last 2 years, the legislature has given us 2 more people. So we're up 4 people than where we were 2 years ago. We're still one of the shortest staffed boards in the state, but it's getting better. And I appreciate that from the legislature. David also asked about, articles published about threats against poll workers. We haven't seen that here locally yet. This seems to be a trend in hot button states, swing states, where there are threats against poll workers or poll watchers that are intending to go to the polls. I don't believe there's anything to fear here in Onondaga County, but we will be very reactive to anybody who's trying to disrupt the polling place, and be very protective of our poll workers as well. And then let's see here. I'm not sure what else he has. So, comment on the Republican operators who are training tens of thousands of poll watchers. Again, same thing. If the poll watchers come in and cause problems, and I don't believe we have to worry about that in Onondaga County, then all right, David, you've asked a lot of questions. I'm gonna end with one other thing then. You wanted me to talk about what will happen at the October 6th OCDC meeting. For those who don't know, OCDC is the Onondaga County Democratic Committee. They're having a meeting on October 6th, on Thursday, to reorganize. And they're going to elect a new chair. Pam Hunter, the chair of the party, has stepped down. And they're going to elect a new secretary. Jimmy Monto, the secretary of the party, has stepped down. We already know who the secretary is going to be because there's only one candidate, Pernadir. Also standing for re-election is myself, and I have no opposition, and Dan Pedrick, the treasurer. There is a contested race for chair. Max Ruckteschell, Donna Moore, Max Ruckteschell, and Ronnie White are three candidates that are running for chair. I am publicly neutral, as always, and I will be happy to support whoever wins the vote on Thursday, because they're going to be our next chair and they're going to lead our party forward. So that's the main thing that's going to happen on Thursday. So that's about it. I have to get going here. This has been a little bit longer than normal, Commissioner Carr, but I wanted to give you the update on the GOP lawsuit. Watch my social feeds as we discuss the suit over the next few days, and the results. And later this week, I will have Supreme Court Justice David Murad running for re-election. He'll be on Zoom with Zarni on Thursday, and this weekend I'll be doing a focus on Senate District 48, on my weekly wonk. So check all of that out. And thank you very much for joining me on Commissioner Carr. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.